Perfect. Okay. So it's really exciting to be here this morning with all of you on a Saturday morning. It feels early because it's Saturday, but I know that you guys have all been working super hard for the past few weeks, and I've seen so many amazing projects on Global. I've heard about so many things from my colleagues. I'm beyond thrilled to be here with you to talk about prototyping. So the first thing is that this is the English session. If ever you prefer to hear the session in French, you can simply change sessions. So you leave this session and you're back on the main hop-in page, and then you join in on the French session where my colleagues Mirella and Cyril will be there. What we intend to do is take 1 hour with you this morning to go over the prototyping course content and show you the canvas that you'll be required to fill in for this sprint. And then for the last half hour, we're all going to come together. So everyone in the French session will come over to us and we'll do a Q&A all together. That's going to give you a chance not just to ask your questions and to get answers, but to meet also the other members of the team, namely Mirella and Cyril. So they are fundamental to the Coopérathon, and they're great guides and resources if you have questions after the session as well. So without further ado, we will talk about prototyping. So just to introduce myself, my name is Deborah. Hi. So I love to build, make things, and geek out on projects, to do a lot of reading, and I'm part of the Desjardins Open Innovation team. The Desjardins Open Innovation team is the team behind the Coopérathon, and we're in our 5th year. This year is fully online, as you know, and we're excited that it gives us the opportunity to actually go across Canada. So we're super happy to see all of you. And maybe just if you want to use the chat, you can let me know where you're from. So I'd love to hear where everyone's from. I'm from Montreal. And if you feel like sharing that on the chat, we'll see where people are from. Oh, we got some more Montreal. Vietnam, wow. Quebec City, Longueuil, fantastic. Montreal as well. Montreal, Sherbrooke, that's great. Laval, wow. Calgary, okay, I'm from Labrador, but spent the past 11 years in Montreal until 2 weeks ago. Wow, so you're actually doing the Coopérathon in 2 different places. That's amazing. Saint-Thérèse. Wow, fantastic. So it really seems like North York. Oh, that's in, I think, Ontario, if I'm not mistaken. That's fantastic, guys. It's really cool to see that that you're joining us from different places across Canada and really across the world. Ontario, yes, perfect. Thanks. So it's exciting to be here with you all this morning, and I thank you really for joining. We're going to be talking about prototyping, and I just want to give you a rough guide for what we will be presenting today. We're going to define what is a prototype. We'll ask ourselves why. Why do we prototype? We'll talk about the when. So when is it key to do that prototype? Who should be building a prototype? How do we prototype? And what is a prototype? Let's look at some examples. Then we'll talk about where. I'll show you some frameworks, give you a few hints at some tools that you can use, and we'll end with a quick start guide. So I'm actually really excited to get to the framework part, not because it means that we've passed over a lot of great content, but there's something special that we've done this year with the framework. So I don't want to give too much away, but we're really thrilled with it, and we're excited for your comments about that. So let's jump in. What is a prototype? Well, it's a rudimentary working model, a sample, a mock-up, or it's just a simulation of the actual product. It's based on which the other forms, such as the MVP, the final product, or even other variations of the product, are developed. And what's the motive? Well, it's actually to validate the functionality and or the design of the actual product. So now that that's out of the way, what does it actually mean? So it means a lot of iteration. So this is an example of how you can look at prototyping. There's a lot of different ways to visualize it. Some people really like to have that conception in their head to say, okay, well, what does it mean to do this prototype? And I just want to emphasize here that it's not at all a straight path. We're not talking about creating something. Here's my prototype. Okay, it's done. Let's pass on to the next phase. Let's commercialize our product and go to market. The whole goal of a prototype is to iterate. You create something fast, simple, cheap, you test it out, and then you go back to the drawing board, you modify it, you see what components of your prototype you want to keep and what's not really necessary. So it's helping you really define that key product that you want to get out there that your consumers want to buy. So the whole idea is that it's not linear. You continue to go back and go back. And as you're prototyping, to go back to ideation, testing it, go back to ideation and testing it. Here's another way to visualize it when we're talking about the evolutionary prototyping model. So in this case, you'll see that that you're gathering all the requirements that you need to develop your product, you're analyzing them, then you develop your prototype and you say, okay, this is my prototype. You take it to your clients or your end users or a sample of your end users, you have them test it out and you get their feedback. You understand what they are suggesting that you improve, what they're suggesting that you add or remove, and then you continue to do the analysis. You go back to analysis and then develop another iteration of the prototype. And then take it back to the clients. When you finally have that satisfactory prototype that you feel you're confident that your end users are confirming, yes, this is what we want, then you can go to the design or the coding and bring it to market. So one question I get fairly often at this stage is, do I have to make a separate prototype every single time? And it's a valid question because you're asking yourself, well, my clients say they don't want this in blue, for example, they want it in another color like red, something flashier. So do I really have to redo the whole thing? The answer is no, not necessarily. Sometimes you can just adjust your prototype and change the features or the components. If it's a hardware, something that you can, a significant change that will respond to what the clients are asking for and test it again. Other times you're going to find that it's valuable to fundamentally create a new prototype. Maybe it's because there's so many things that you have to change. Maybe it's because you want to change the type of prototype, the materials you're using, because you do not feel that the ideas are getting across as well as you'd like. So I just want to emphasize there that there's no magic answer to a lot of things in prototyping. And this is just one more example of, it's not necessarily true that you want to have a new prototype every time, but you may find it's beneficial. So why do you prototype? Short answer, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's better, and it's actually going to give you a stronger product in the end than the alternative. But here's the secret. It does not always feel that way. So when you're prototyping, you can feel like you're stalling, like it's taking forever, like it's just, you want to just get it out there. I can imagine that, and feel free to add your comments on the chat, but I can imagine that many of you are so confident in your idea, your concept, you just want to make it and sell it and put it out there in the world. Is there anyone here that feels that way, that they just want to get it out there? They just want to start selling? Especially in Coopérathon, where it's, yes, it's a fast-paced competition. I want to start testing. That's good to hear, Daniela. Yeah. Researching. I like that. So it's normal. I think you guys are all participating in the Coopérathon because you're well equipped to work at a fast pace. You can take in ideas really quickly and you're either learning for the first time how to produce quickly, or this is natural to you, but either way you like that. So the prototyping is often the place where you feel like, I don't want to be held back. I just want to go, go, go. But what's really key is what Daniela actually just mentioned in the chat, testing, researching, because you want to make sure that when you get out there, you actually have a product that people absolutely want to buy or use or consume. You are having the product that has the best market fit possible. That is your best chance of success. I can tell you from experience that if you launch a product and you have not done your testing, it will take you a lot of time to go backwards and to redo that whole production line to get a product that people actually want. So if you can do your testing and your research at this phase where your prototyping is really fast and cheap and you can whip something up in maybe an hour, maybe a week, that's the place where you want to learn and fail and figure out the best solution. So again, why are you wanting to prototype? Well, we want to be able to answer questions like, are there problems with the design or the functionality as is? Yes, as the maker, you have a warranted bias. So it's normal to feel that this is the best thing in the whole world. Everyone's going to love it. it can be really difficult to get in that mind of the end user, of the consumer, and have that empathy and understand, well, what do they really want? It can be really challenging also to let go of things. When we create a prototype and we hear answers that we're not expecting or we don't want, it can be difficult to be open to it and to say, well, you know, I really didn't think that they wanted this as a, I don't know, as a circle, and I could never conceive of this product like it, but that seems to be what they want. So we want to understand that. What are the problems that we maybe foresee, or what are the problems we're not even aware of, the unknown unknowables? We want to ask the question as well, what do my customers really want? How much time and money will product development take? So that one's really key. Creating your prototype also helps you to get to that next stage where you're actually building for development, building for manufacturing, or designing for manufacturing. You want to understand, who is my target market? Now that's a really fun one. Sometimes when you create a prototype and you're so sure, you're like, I know my persona. I mean, you've all gone through the past few weeks of Coopérathon. You've worked with this whole model of understanding who that target market is. And sometimes when you create your prototype and you test it with that target market, you suddenly get a realization that maybe it's actually not the best fit with them. Maybe it's actually their parents or their kids that are the best fit. Maybe they're buying the product, but they're not actually the ones using it. So maybe I have to redefine who my target market is. At this point, I don't want to scare all of you, so I hope it's there. I love that. Eli just added to the willingness to pay, and you're absolutely right. So you want to test out, how much is your end user willing to pay for your good or service? And then finally, what is your minimum viable product? So the whole goal with this is to identify those key features, those key functionalities that you absolutely need to do to add to take it to market. You want to make your product as inexpensively as possible. And of course, you want it to be the most beautiful thing in the world. But the truth is that a lot of end consumers will not see every single bell and whistle you want to add on. They just want the minimum. They want the functionality that is so key to them, that made them buy the product to begin with. So when do you prototype? You have an idea. You've gone already through a few sprints with design thinking. This is the moment to prototype. So in your case, it's this week. So now is your time to prototype. And you're building this prototype so that you can do it. You can prepare for your MVP. So this there. And who should prototype? This is a classic question. Again, we always think that it's the startup that's going to be prototyping their new product. But in truth, startups, even if you have a product out there in the market, if you're going for a new user, or if you're trying to adopt a new strategy for your product or for your sales, it is time to prototype again. So it's a process that we can always return to as well. For large companies as well, we're always developing prototypes to test them before we take it to market. So in my background, I was formerly the head of research and development at Desjardins Lab, and that's where we did a lot of prototyping for Desjardins. And I currently work with Desjardins Open Innovation Team, where we're helping teams like yourselves from the Coopérathon on their technical needs. And so again, we're seeing companies of all different sizes at all different stages that need to prototype. And of course, individuals. Sometimes it's going to happen that you have a fantastic idea and you don't know if there's maybe a market for it. You don't know if you should go and look for a co-founder or start building it out and running a solo company. Prototype. It's the way to find your answer of whether something will work. So how to prototype? There's no right way, but here's a suggestion. Start with your idea, consider it, and then look at what the user needs are and how that blends with your idea. Where's the overlap? Sometimes you have an idea that's very far reaching, but if you can bring it down and really narrow the scope, so you're really just focused on that user need. I'm going to give you a concrete example. You have an idea that you want to build a food truck that's going to go around, I'll say Laval, and deliver people delicious food on the go. Well, users, they don't need all types of food. What they're actually telling you from your research is that they just really want food at lunchtime, and they're a big fan of things that are quick to eat, like smoothies and snack bars. And so your idea is this huge thing. You're picturing in your head this elaborate food truck that's beautiful and has a gorgeous design on the outside. It's a different theme every single week to draw in customers. But your users are saying, wait, we just want something simple. I want to be able to buy a granola bar when I'm on the street. So that's where you want to take your idea. You want to respect it. You don't want to say, hey, I'm done with that idea. Let's move on to just focusing on what the users need, because no, you have something really special there. But for your prototype, for your minimum viable product, for that first stage, just focus on where the users are taking you, what your users are saying that they'd like. You can always expand from there. You can always bring your user needs out, but you want to start from really the overlap of where their needs are. You have to also consider your capacity. So I know that all of you, because you're here on a Saturday morning, and it's really wonderful to see you all here, but I know for a fact that, well, I'm pretty sure that all of you are incredibly hardworking and devoted people that just love to build and create and do something new. You're doing the Coopérathon. You're responding to social impact challenges. That's fantastic. And if you're like me, you probably have a tendency to want to do everything. It's really important to just take a look at yourself, at your team, and say, well, okay, realistically, I don't have 100 hours every day to dedicate to this project. How much time do I actually have? When am I going to build this? So are my free hours only on the weekends? Is it nights? Is it during the day? What is my actual capacity in terms of time to do this project? Then say to yourself, what is my capacity in terms of my skills? So when you're prototyping, as you're going to see, there's a whole range of how you can build a prototype. You can be drawing on paper, you can be designing in 3D. What you choose to do as a medium will depend on your product, but it will also depend on what you're capable of doing, where your skills are. And then, of course, you want to, I'm just going to click over here. If you have a team, consider your team. And I wrote, if you have a team. I know for the Coopérathon, you are coming together as teams, and that's wonderful. So you can have some overlap, you can have some diverse skills. Sometimes it's at the prototyping stage too, that teams say, you know, I really need somebody to help me with the user experience. I'm going to go look for a user experience developer. Or, you know, I really need somebody who can help me with 3D design. So I'm going to look for that skill. You might bring them into your team. You might just subcontract, but you've identified what capacity you maybe don't have and you want to get to make that prototype. Values. So this is something we feel is really important. You're here at the Coopérathon not just to produce a company that's going to make you millions. You're here to respond to social impact challenges. It means you care not just about the money, but about the social aspects, about the environment, about the culture behind everything. And we're really, really grateful, by the way, that there's literally like over 1,000 people that responded to this Coopérathon challenge this year and can find themselves within these values. It's important to consider what your values are when you're building your prototype as well. We're going to see that a little bit later in the prototyping canvas. You're going to look at the competition. So sometimes when you're creating your prototype, you're going to see that a competitor has either a product on the market that's really interesting that you might want to try to emulate certain aspects of it so that your end user can understand what you're building. So a concrete example is if you're building a smartwatch. Well, sometimes it can be useful to use similar materials or similar shape and style so you can convey that functionality, that design, that product that people are already familiar with. So in other words, if you're creating a smartwatch, you may be better off creating something that can go around the wrist. It could just be a piece of paper and written on a design, but something that has that same look in some way, rather than creating a static page where you draw the design out. So you want to think about how your competitors use their products and how it's perceived by others. And there's a whole bunch of other questions, that a whole bunch of other aspects that you want to consider, and it can relate to you personally, your team, everything out there. There's really a lot to think about. So let's get into what to prototype. And when you're creating a prototype, your goal is to test 1 to 3 concepts. So I'm going to say that again. You can say you're creating your prototype for multiple reasons. But at the end of the day, you want to be testing 1 to 3 concepts. Another way of saying that is you want to test 1 to 3 hypotheses. So you want to test little aspects of it to validate that this is what the consumer wants. One major fallacy or one major problem that some teams do is they create a product, or they create their prototype rather, and they say, let me just see if the whole thing works. The problem with that is that when you're getting feedback on something that's so big, like the whole product, you're going to get feedback that's going to send you into a whole bunch of different directions. So if we go back to that smartwatch example, if I'm creating a smartwatch and I design it and I take it to somebody and I want to test whether or not they like it, the question is so vague that I'm going to get people saying, you know, yes, I like it, but I wish it was this color, or I wish it looked like this, or I wish it was that. And other people saying, I don't know, maybe I do. I'm not really sure. And other people saying, well, no, it could be maybe really interesting if it had these features to it. In other words, your range of responses, what you're going to hear from your end user, could take you into a million different directions. You could present them a smartwatch that's a simple black smartwatch with one simple feature, but because your question is so wide and you're not focused on what you're testing, you're going to have them, your users, tell you that it should be pink, but also blue, but also red, and it should have all these extra features, and you should be developing all these extra things to add to it. It's going to take you too far. You're not going to really clearly understand what your key features are, what your key prototype should be. So my best advice is to focus it. We're going to see in the canvases coming up how we can use one of those worksheets to really define what our key hypothesis is, and maybe just start with one hypothesis to test your prototype. Then you can move on to incorporating a second and a third. Some people prefer to do this in iterations. So in other words, they're going to test one hypothesis. For example, I think that people like the color being black, versus I think that people like to have a choice of color for their smartwatch. That's the first hypothesis you're going to test. You'll do your user testing. Then you'll come back, you'll modify your prototype based on what you hear. And then you'll say, okay, let's test some functionalities now. Let me test the functionality of this or that. So that's a really key thing to keep in mind. So what are you actually prototyping? So if it's software or an app, I'll just see if there's, yeah, okay, we're good. So if you're testing, if you're prototyping software or an app, a really easy way to do it is just to do a paper drawing. So take a piece of paper, draw an outline of a phone or an iPad, and then sketch it out. And I know what you're thinking. You may not be the best drawer in this chat, but I can guarantee you that you're better than me, and it doesn't matter. You're going to get the refined product later on. This isn't about it being beautiful. This is about it conveying your message clearly. You can, of course, use different programs. I'll show you a few later on to create a wireframe. You can also create a non-functional or an incomplete version. And here I'm talking to everyone who has a penchant for coding in the chat. So if you like coding and your natural go-to is just to start building in code instead of building in pictures and wireframes, then go for it. Whatever feels the most natural to you. It again goes back to what we were saying before. Use the tools, the capacity, the competences that you have, that your team has, and build the prototype that best suits your needs. You can, of course, also use PowerPoint or Canva. So Canva is a tool that has really quick templates, and you can use that. It's fantastic. You can create a free account, and you can convey your software application through that. If you're doing something that's hardware or a product, the simplest way to do something is a cardboard model. I mean, simplest for some. Some people are really not that tactile. They have trouble visualizing in that same way. In that case, I suggest going for something like craft materials or Lego, where it gives you a basis to build off on. And if you're at the other end where you like already designing in CAD and you're familiar with 3D modeling, you can go to a CAD software and build it there. You can also 3D print if you wanted to have something tangible for people to feel. In terms of hardware and product, it is preferable that you give somebody a physical product that they can touch and feel to give you that comment on how your prototype is, but it's not absolutely necessary. You can find ways to do it without, especially right now because we're adapting to being all remote. There's ways to present it and to give people still that feeling that they're engaging with their prototype, even if it's not tactile in front of them. If you're planning to do a service, my suggestion for prototypes is do a pop-up. Try a pop-up concept. There's websites online where if you want to rent space, you can rent it on a temporary basis to create that pop-up. You can also just create it in a communal space outside or a yard, or right now with COVID especially, if you can respect social distancing rules and do it outside, that might be an option. You can also do it online. So it's definitely possible to set up a Zoom call or a Meet call or a Microsoft Teams call and stage your background to look like the experience that somebody would be coming into, and do your best to role play it. Of course, role playing itself is a great way to prototype a service. And what I want to put the emphasis on here, consider the before, the during, and the after the experience. So when it comes to a software or hardware, it's easy to say this is it. But for a service, it's like a journey, right? It's not just the moment you step into a restaurant that your experience begins. When it's a service, you have to think of how somebody gets to the restaurant. How do they book with you? How do they find out about you? What's the experience they're expecting to have? What are their anticipations before they get there? And then afterwards, how do they feel that night, the next day? Are they raving to friends? Are they sick to their stomachs? You want to consider all of this. And finally, you can create a decision tree script. So this is kind of like a choose your own adventure for any fans of those old kid books in the room. You can create a decision tree and then just think about all the different decisions people can make while they're consuming your service, again, with the before, during, and after in mind, and then ask them to role play that out. So if anyone's interested in decision tree script, I strongly recommend that when my colleague Cyril joins at 11:30, you can ask him about some really cool softwares he's been using to create some decision trees online. And it actually gives you a chance to create something online and to have people engage with your content in a super easy way. Okay, so let's keep going. Here's a few examples of different prototypes, just to give you an idea, a visual. This whole presentation is going to be shared, and I believe we're also recording, so you're going to have a chance to look it over in more detail. So I'll go a bit faster through this because I really want to make sure we have time to look at the canvas. So there's visual prototypes. Here's an example of something on top that's 3D printed, on the bottom, the final product. 3D printing is often used because it's fast to iterate and it's a lot of fun. There's a user experience prototype. So here's an example of somebody who did not create a user experience in an app itself or a wireframe. They just did a simple drawing in a tool online. There's the paper prototype, which is one of my favorites because it's surprisingly simple and yet so efficient to convey the ideas. There's the working prototype. So here we see the different phases where we're going from the wireframe, which is still valid for a prototype. Then there's a mock-up. And if you want to push that concept further, you can do something that has some functionality to it. Oftentimes this is done when it's like you're nearing the end of your prototyping cycle. So you've gone in a few cycles, you've tested your hypothesis, and you feel like your ideas are almost final. And so you want to create something that's working just to work out those last little bugs or work out those last little ideas. Sorry, I'm just going to get some water. Everyone's okay so far? How are we doing on the chat? All right. Perfect. Good to hear. And Daniela, you mentioned about the decision tree. I'm very excited to hear your comments too in the Q&A after. Great. Perfect. Oh, I'm glad to hear you guys are doing well. All right. So there's also the functional prototype. I love showing this one because it looks so cool. This whole gadget is like a wristband that has like a projector to project on your wrist, all these things. This is a Kickstarter product that failed, and they made people think they had a functional prototype, but it was all staged. So goes to show. The idea behind this, though, is that you can create something that in a picture looks functional. So if you're looking at testing your product remotely, this is a way to kind of hack it. So you don't have to do the whole thing. You don't have to actually make a projector be that tiny and that crisp and that clear. You can just give a chance to Photoshop and create it in there. There's also the proof of concept or the proof of principle prototype. So this is usually associated with hardware, but it's really to make sure that on a technical level, it can actually work. These kind of prototypes are typically done when you're trying to prove something to investors or you're trying to go for a patent. So I think at this stage, it's probably a little bit early for your teams to consider going this far and this intense with your prototype. But then again, maybe some of you are there already, and this may be a future direction to explore. So where to prototype? This is a little bit small, but my goal in this slide is to show you that you can prototype anywhere. If you're in your room and you have a piece of paper, you can start drawing out your ideas. A few other places you can look at is there's some maker spaces. And especially right now with COVID, a lot of them are starting to offer online sessions to help you learn certain skills. And so that's always an option to do. If you do want to go to the route of crowdsourcing, you can look at 3D Hubs. So 3D Hubs is an online platform where you can get help with printing. So 3D printing one of your physical prototypes, or even designing a 3D prototype. There's a lot of UX communities as well online that will have people you can work with and collaborate with on certain projects. And there's, of course, accelerators, which may be a logical next step for some of you after the Coopérathon's over to go and to continue your prototyping journeys in accelerators. Oftentimes, they're going to ask you for a prototype ready before you get admission to a certain accelerator. So it's great you're already doing this now. And of course, just offices, schools, with your friends, at home, pretty much anywhere. What about you guys online? Is there anywhere that you say, this is absolutely where to prototype, or this is a resource online that everyone needs to know about? Does anyone want to share some thoughts on where they like to prototype? I'll take the silence as everywhere and anywhere. So, but feel free to share that later on as the chat goes on. Oh, okay, perfect. Umar says Balsamic. Yes, that's what we use. That's a great tool. Reminiscing Adobe XD. Yes, absolutely. Oh, Julio, very cool. Electronics workbench in my basement. Very, very cool. So I love that you guys are going from the range. I can see some people who are making maybe more software, some people who are doing more electronics. That is really exciting to know that there's such a huge range here. It's fantastic, guys. So let's talk now about Tech for Good and what is Tech for Good. And I'm just going to do a little preface. Why we're presenting this here is because when you talk about having a social impact project or a social impact product or service, the prototyping phase is where you really want to strongly start considering Tech for Good. So Tech for Good should be there the whole time as one of your values, as one of your reflections. It goes hand in hand with social impact. But people often think, oh, well, I'm just going to make sure that my end product is good. I want to get you thinking that actually, let's back it up and let's start integrating it into our whole prototyping process. I'll explain what it is first, though, so we're all on the same page. Tech for Good. It's a community of people, projects, organizations, and funders that are promoting the role of technology to improve social, environmental, and economic outcomes. Another way of defining it is Tech for Good is the intentional design, development, and use of digital technologies to address social challenges. So you may not know this yet, but you're all, in a way, doing a Tech for Good project already. This is a term that's gained popularity over the past few years. Some of you who are already familiar with the term will be aware that there's a declaration Tech for Good that was created through Communitech, which is one of the partners for Coopérathon. And that's being promoted for organizations across Canada. So if you're interested in learning more, you can sign up with them or Google online Declaration Tech for Good. My colleague Cyril, who you'll be meeting at 11:30, is our lead Tech for Good for Desjardins Open Innovation. And part of his role, part of the whole role of Desjardins Open Innovation is to promote this idea, this concept of considering not just the economic purpose of technology, but the social impact, the environmental impact, that the whole, if you want to say another way of saying it, the triple bottom line when it comes to your product development. And there's different ways of seeing it. So again, it's not a new concept, but it's one that's starting to evolve and be talked about more and more. This is a framework that I really like to present as a way of considering Tech for Good. And it's the 5 E's framework that was created by Accenture when they studied a lot of different companies and organizations around the world who were implementing Tech for Good in their practices. And they said, well, there's 5 E's you have to consider. You have to first build a strong foundation of digital ethics. So that ethical design is kind of like the bottom part that goes all the way across. When you're engineering, you should engineer solutions for the next billion. So that implies a lot. You're talking about not just creating the consumers of today, but also considering the consumers of tomorrow, considering the product life cycle that you have, considering how your product will endure, if it will endure, and how you ensure that your product is at peace also with a society that's considering the environment and that's able to support an next billion. You want to embed social good in the business models and the offerings. I think a lot of you are doing that either consciously or unconsciously already. You want to enable civil society with digital capacity to address market cracks. So this is one of the cores that you see at Coopérathon as well. You want to look at where are there issues, where are there cracks in the market and in the societal structure, who doesn't have access to something, who needs access to something, where are the services lacking that are desperately needed, and you want to create solutions that help people help themselves. And finally, you want to educate to build capacity to absorb innovation for the masses. So this just goes with highlighting the impact your technology has. And if you are doing something that's for tech for good, I strongly recommend that you make that clear, you make that known, because this movement of tech for good is becoming bigger and bigger as we go. So in terms of prototyping, I've just given a few hints here, and we're going to see it with the canvas. But what it actually means is considering a diversified and inclusive testers and users. So we often talk about diversity and inclusion. It should be talked about definitely a lot more, and it's becoming much more on the forefront of people's thoughts. But I want to drive this point home. It's not just in your end product that you want to consider it. You want to talk about who are you testing with currently? Who are your end users? And are there maybe blind spots that you unconsciously don't know about that you have? So for example, if you're considering a certain demographic and you're saying, my solution is fantastic for concert goers. And I think that they're, typically the 18 to 45-year-old crew. Well, maybe consider broadening that and saying, well, are there people outside of my range that I should be including either in a significant way or less of a way? Maybe there's kids that are relevant to this product. Maybe there's grandparents, or 45 is not grandparent, but you know what I mean? You want to stretch that range and question yourself. Ask yourself, am I really having an inclusive testing base and user base? And am I showing diversity in who I'm testing with and who my product can be available for? You also want to consider the types of materials you're using. So recycling, reusing is key. If you create a paper prototype and you think that you have to go to an art store and buy high glossy paper and beautiful new things, my suggestion to you is just take a step back and realize that it's not that expensive glossy paper that's going to make or break your prototype. It's your idea behind it and how you convey it. And you can just as well do that with some scraps of paper you have lying around the home. I know it doesn't seem like a big thing, but I want to emphasize this here because, again, we often think that prototyping has to be this elaborate, beautiful conception and only the best quality of things will do because otherwise people will think it's cheap or it's not, doing justice to our ideas. And in truth, recycling products and reusing things, reconceptualizing something that you have that's scrap, that's recycling already at your house, that can really make a much more effective product. And you're respecting the values too of having a tech for good product. Finally, consider the triple bottom line at all stages. So the triple bottom line, it's sometimes referred to as social, environmental, economic. It can also be people, what is it again? People, there's another way of saying it. You guys might know. People, planet, and something with money that starts with a P. Really cool alliteration. People, planet, profit. Yes, thank you. You guys are awesome. 3 points. Absolutely. Thank you, Pierre. So oftentimes when we're talking about a final product, we'll say, okay, well, how does this make me money? How is this good for the society or different cultural sectors? And how is this good for the environment? We should be considering this even in the prototyping stage because your prototype is what's going to help you dictate that final product. So let's get to the canvases, frameworks. All right, so here is what I'm super excited to be showing you. It is the Tech for Good prototyping canvas. So a little story behind this, and I know it's probably really small on your screen. I'm going to show you at the end where you can find these resources. This is what you have to fill in for the Sprint 3. So don't worry, there's a version that you can actually see that's a lot bigger. So the idea, and I'm just going to make mine bigger so I can actually read it. The idea behind this was that to prepare for this course, my colleague Cyril and I looked at a lot of different prototyping canvases that are out there. And you don't absolutely need to use a canvas or a framework, but the whole goal of a canvas or a framework is it helps you to consider everything. It asks you the questions you may not ask yourself. It helps you to make it clear, concise. And this is something that somebody else can look at and be like, oh, I get it, So if you're trying to recruit teammates, if you're trying to show something to investors, this is a tool that will help you convey it simply, and it makes you look more organized as well. I can't state enough that sometimes you're going to see information on a canvas that provokes a question in you that you would not have considered otherwise. So the story behind this is that we were looking at different canvases for prototyping. There's some good ones out there, but we found that they were missing that critical tech for good angle. And I'm going to show you some examples of how we've integrated it into this canvas. And for this canvas too, if you guys have any questions, we can use the chat, and we can also at 11:30, when everyone else joins, we'll spend some time on here. So the idea here is the product name is your top left. Typically, when somebody looks at a canvas, they'll start filling it in from left to right, but your product name, don't worry if you don't have that right away. Sometimes it's only through a few iterations of your prototype that you're actually going to say, hey, this is a good name. And I can tell you from creating a few products myself that the initial name you start out with may not always be the name you end up with. And sometimes it's through user conversations or about your prototype that they'll just say something that'll trigger an idea for you. So it doesn't have to be filled in, but if you have a name already, you can put it there. Then you're going to identify your opportunity. And this is something that Mirella was saying that you probably already have done. And so it's just reiterating it in another way. So you've done it through other sprints. So you're asking yourself, how might we, and then you've got a blank here. My screen is so small. Let me just see it. So how might we, and then it's the experience here for, and then you're putting in who the end users are for, and then so that with your desired effect. So how might we blank for blank so that blank? So in other words, how might we create the best smartwatch out there for our grandmothers so that they can monitor their heart rate and detect early symptoms of strokes? How might we help concert goers find their place in line so that they can easily respect COVID guidelines, but still see the shows that they want to see? My examples are off the top of my head so that they're not that fantastic, but feel free to use the chat if you guys would like to share some examples of your how might we blank for blank so that blank. It's something that takes a little bit of time to think about as well. And again, it's one of those things you can cross out, rewrite, and all of this. There's some people asking for the link. And so, yes, on the Coopérathon Global front page, and you can also see it in questions for mentors. There's the, here, maybe I can drop the link in here. Let me see. Here's the link for the document if you want to look at a bigger version while we're going through this. And that's going to help you, you can download it. So you fill in the opportunity, and the tagline is kind of like a, what's your catchphrase? So that's fun. It's a creative exercise to do. And again, it may not be something that happens naturally at the first part of your product. You might only realize it later. Then we go to the left, and we're going to start to define. And I'm going to actually download it myself because it's very teeny tiny to read. Let me see. There we go. Screens get smaller and smaller. All right. So on the far left, you see the section that says define. And so again, if anyone wants to grab their copy on the link I just shared and download it, you can absolutely do that. So you define, first of all, your clients and your users. And this is really, really key. Sometimes they're one and the same, and sometimes they're completely different. So your clients are, who do I think will buy it? The user is, who do I think will use it? So classic example, I buy toys. Do I use, well, yes, I do use the toys, but it's mostly my son that plays with the toys. He's the user. So when I'm buying something, I'm using my resources to procure the toy, but I'm considering who I'm buying it for. So I'm not buying a toy that, oh, I'm just buying trucks right now, to be honest. That's that's what we're doing. So it's something to think about, just to separate that client and user. Again, sometimes it's one and the same. Sometimes your client is somebody who's buying a smartwatch, and they will also be the person using the smartwatch. But you're going to see as we go along how you're developing your prototype, how you're testing your prototype, really depends on those two key stakeholders. And my recommendation would be to test your prototype on both if they're not one and the same. So you want to make sure that your prototype is interesting for clients to buy and for users to use. In green, you're going to see the additions that we made. So again, with the idea that prototyping canvases out there, you can find a bunch, but they do not consider the diversity and inclusion angles. They do not consider the tech for good angles. We wanted to make sure that you guys get this in here because you are going through the Coopérathon and you are working on social impact projects. So the question we ask here is, who might need this product but cannot access it? And it's a bit of a difficult question to ask, but we want to really drive the point home that sometimes your market is somewhere that doesn't have access to the product, either because it's too expensive or just not available in their region. So consider this. And why do you want to consider this? Because it might have an impact on how you develop your prototype, where you sell to, how you create a market strategy. It can have a whole range of implications. Sometimes people say that, you know, there's a whole segment of the market that could need their product but doesn't have access to it, and so then they start thinking about, well, how can I create this differently? So one way to just think of that is Tom's Shoes, which I know is a classic example. But they said, okay, I'm creating this. I have my client that they're going to buy it. It's maybe adults are going to buy these shoes, and the users, well, the person who's going to use the shoe is maybe the same person that's going to buy it, or they buy it for their partners, their kids, their parents, whatever. But what's that last question there? Who might need it but can't have access to it? So in their case, they said, well, there's some children in Africa that we've seen in different villages. They did work on the ground, and they said, we know that they need these shoes. These are good quality shoes that can help them. And they just don't have access because it's too expensive, and it's not available in their region. So they created the 2-for-1 program where you buy one pair of Tom shoes and one is donated. So that's a way to address that gap that you have already in your thing, in your prototype. So I'm gonna start speeding along because I realize we've only got 12 minutes left together before we join the sessions. So here in this bottom corner, you've got analyze. And analyze, you're looking at the classic DVF framework. So we've integrated in here. It's a lot of fun. If you don't yet know about DVF, you can read on it. If you're one of those people that likes to research things in advance, it's quite simple though. What it's saying is my product or service, is it desirable? Is it feasible? And is it viable? So in terms of desirable, you're just asking yourself the question, do I think people want it? Hopefully the answer is yes. Sometimes it's, I don't know, you know, and it's okay to admit on this canvas that you do not know, because if anything, that's going to give you hints later on to what you need to test. Then in terms of feasibility, do I think people want it? Sorry. Yep. This was a misprint. We're going to change this. So feasibility is, do I think that it can actually be produced technologically? So sorry about that. For everyone reading this canvas live, we're going to get the corrected version ASAP. But feasibility is, can I technically build it? So can I technically create this prototype? So I'm going to go back to that example that we saw where there was a prototype a few slides back of an orange wristband that was projecting onto a person's wrist. And remember how I told you that the technology was not possible, but they created a prototype and they actually created a Kickstarter. And one of the points of failure was that they did not conduct this analysis. They created the product before the technology was capable of scaling to that level. And unfortunately, it is a common thing. What would have been a great thing for them to have done is to analyze and say, you know, feasibility, it's not feasible right now, from the technology is just not there. So what is feasible? What could I create in terms of a prototype and an end product? And let me redesign my prototype so that it best captures what the product will actually look like. I don't want to give people a false sense of, you know, this magic and illusion, and then you sell them on a tiny wristband that projects a beautiful thing onto your wrist, and they end up with the final product that's this like clunky, giant, I don't know what. So it's just something to consider. So these questions you're asking yourself are about the end product, and you're trying to consider how it plays into your prototype. And then finally, viability. Do I think it will be economically viable to produce and sell? So for some of you, you may be working on a nonprofit model, but it's still important to consider paying expenses for the product or service to be developed. We're asking ourselves the last question here, and this is again in green: is this product environmentally and socially viable? And that's something that we don't often consider at the prototyping stage, but we are building towards our product. So we should be thinking like, Is it going to have a positive impact on the environment? Am I going to be depleting resources? Am I considering the resources I'm using to create this product? Am I considering the social implications of my product? So it's a lot of food for thought, I hope. Then you go into the middle column, which is the plan. And here it's a bit simpler. You just get to check things off. So you say, hey, what type of product am I creating? Is it a software or an application, hardware or product, or service? It can be more than one. Some people have a service like a pop-up restaurant shop, but they also are using an app to sell their products. You might have two. You might have a hardware product that comes with the software as well. So check off all that apply. And then this is just a fun way to get you to think about how you want to build it. So with your materials, do you want to use paper, cardboard, pens, crayons, marker, Lego, Play-Doh, using computers, software, something else? Why we're asking you to do this here is that even if it changes, you want to start thinking in the mindset of the materials you're going to use and planning it from the stage out. This is really your canvas to plan your prototype. And then finally, what skills do I need? So here's where you say, well, in an ideal world, these are the skills that I need to build the type of prototype that I want, considering what my end product is. You might find that your team already has these skills, or that you don't, but you're willing to learn them, or that you need a bit of help. And that's what I know the forums are really great for. So this is going on to the question of sourcing. Is my team equipped with the skills and materials to build the prototype we want? It's okay if not, but if not, you have to consider two things. Either change the type of prototype you're building, so you're building something that's within the skill set of your team, or learn the skill, or get help from somebody else, maybe bring on another teammate that has that capacity. And then these last two questions in green that are, again, bringing that tech for good element. Am I using sustainably sourced and or shared and or secondhand tools to build my prototype? So I think we're trying to drive that point home, that even at the prototype phase, we want to consider the life cycle of the physical and the tools, the computers we're using. If we can share tools, that's a great way to do it. It's I know this often thought about as being thrifty for a startup to just borrow, share, or recycle. But even if you guys are coming into this competition with like $1 million company and you're iterating on a design, you should still, it's not just about being thrifty, you should still have this mindset, because it's about caring for the planet and caring for the resources that we're using the whole way through. And then finally, does my team have the diversity edge to help us consider different points of view? So in this question, we're really asking you to think about your team. It's normal to have a team that's a bit more homogeneous, because you're trying to find people that have the same values, that get along. And that's not what we're saying. We're not saying have people in your team that you're going to conflict or fight with. We're saying that just be aware of the diversity within your team. So it's not just about diverse points of view. It's diverse cultures, diverse languages, diverse sometimes belief systems, diverse backgrounds, diverse ages. One thing that, if I could just say a personal story, impressed me so much about the Coopérathon in all the years that I've seen it through the past 4 years, is that typically teams too tend to have this diversity. It's the only competition I've seen like this, the only program where you can have a team of people from all different backgrounds, all different experience levels, ages, genders, everything. And now that it's online, that's a component that can sometimes be hard to do, but I want to really emphasize that it is only going to bring you strength. Having those different perspectives, having people that you can talk to and that you can check things off with, that's only going to bring you strength in your final design. It's going to create a more inclusive product. It's going to bring you ideas you never would have thought of otherwise. It's only going to broaden your horizon and give you more success. So I know that you guys don't need convincing, but I think it is still important to make sure that you ask yourselves that question of, do I have the diversity edge? And if I don't, what different profiles do I want to look for? Do I want to just be open to different people coming into our team? All right, speeding up a little bit, top right, design. So core functions. You first want to start with asking yourself, what is the most important core function that your prototype and final product must include? So we're really asking you just for that one thing. For example, if your prototype is a smartwatch, well, it must have some way of telling the time. That's my core function. Other things are extras that are great, but we want to really get you thinking about what's the one thing that your prototype must have, that your final product must have. The reason why is because often people get taken away by building out all these really cool bells and whistles, And when they bring it to the client, they realize that the actual core function has not been refined or properly demonstrated, so it's hard to test what it is. And then impact. How will my prototype help people? So how the prototype and the final product help people, and how might it have a negative impact, either social, environmental, cultural, and what can I do to mitigate this impact? These are really, really tough questions. We're here to help you work them through, but it is something that at this stage you should be considering. What is the impact? So we talk about it a lot when it comes to social media and different apps as the negative impact of how addictive some things are, and what can you do to mitigate it. Well, you can put in time alarms so that somebody doesn't use your product for too long, that they don't get addicted, that they have a way to stop it. It applies to all different products. You have to consider the positive and the negative. Your product is not a neutral thing in the world. Your product will have reactions, and this is the time to start thinking about it. And then finally, bust out your drawing skills. Just draw a rough sketch of what your prototype will look like. Does not have to be beautiful, but we're just asking you to kind of start sketching it out so that even if you go to your prototype and you're eventually going to build it with other materials, you have something here on your one-pager canvas that shows you exactly what your intention is. All right, so we're almost wrapping up at the end, and then we're going to go to the Q&A. So I'm presenting here another canvas. It's not mandatory for you to do, but I think it's pretty cool. It's called the experiment canvas. And what the idea is that after you have your prototype ready and you have to test some things with it. So again, we said test 1 to 3 hypotheses. This is a really great way to visualize and to write out, to clarify those hypotheses. So you start by saying, okay, this is my experiment. I'm going to do 1 to start. I'm going to put down my riskiest assumption, and then I'm going to start defining, like, we believe that blank with at least blank. So we believe that a specific testable action with at least a minimum number of respondents selected from our target audience. So right in here, in these white squares, you're going to fill in what is my target audience. So my target audience is X, Y, Z. Results in at least what type of percentage positive results? Responses like, well, what counts as a positive response within what time frame? Whoops. And then, so you have your hypothesis in this column here. And then when you test it, you actually write what actually happened. And then you say, well, is my conclusion, is it validated? Is it invalidated? Is it inconclusive? And based on that, what are my next steps? Am I going to go back and redo my prototype, or am I going to go forward and test another hypothesis? So maybe for this one, I'm going to move on, but if anyone wants a concrete example in the Q&A, I'd be happy to give one. I want to make sure I get through the content. The feedback capture grid is a really classic, simple way to get feedback from your users. So you present them your prototype, you have a hypothesis in mind that you've detailed out on your experiment canvas, and then you're just asking questions that are like, what do you like the most? What could be improved? What did you not understand? And what are maybe new ideas to consider? The feedback capture grid is usually used to capture when you're testing one specific hypothesis, but it can be more general. Again, my strong recommendation is to be specific in your hypothesis, because otherwise, if you use this as a general, like, hey, do you like my prototype? You're going to get wide ranges of answers, and your things I don't understand are going to take you all over the place. Your new ideas to consider are going to be turning your smartwatch into a food truck. So you really need to make sure your focus is here. So for example, if you say, I'm testing a smartwatch, I want to make sure that people like the functionality of the wristband, because I've offered it in different colors and different textures. And so you ask them specifically about the wristband and the functionality. What did you like the most? What could be improved? What did you not understand? Did you understand how to open it, how to change it, etc.? And are there new ideas I should consider? So this is how you can capture it in a very a great synthesis to do it. And this is something that some startups choose to give this template to their users and say, hey, fill this out for me. Others want to keep it on their end and just ask those questions and fill it out as you go. Some people like having one of these feedback capture grids per user, per tester. Others like to use it as a way to synthesize all their information. There's every way is the right way for this. And then finally, we're getting to the end. These are just a few tools that I'd strongly recommend if you are looking for where to start with prototyping. So I've tried to divide it into hardware, software. I am much more of a, well, I find that it's usually a blend, and it depends, again, what you're comfortable with. You're going to find in here, for example, in the software list, there's like Adobe XD and Balsamic is some tools that some people in the chat were recommending, and they are fantastic. If you're new to it and you're not really sure where to start, I'd suggest going into Canva or even trying the Marvel app. So Canva is an online tool. You can create a free account, and there's already templates there. You just change the text or change some colors. Marvel is something you can use where you're drawing out by hand. For example, if you're doing an application, you draw by hand your screens, and then you use the app, and then you create like functions, like a touch button that launches this next hand-drawn sketch there. So it can be really fun to use. Same thing with hardware. Whoops, sorry. If you're new to things and you really have your mind set on creating a 3D model, check out Tinkercad. It's a fun way to create in 3D if you're new to creating in 3D. There's also Thingiverse, which is a whole library of online 3D resources where you can maybe grab something and use that to show. And then it goes all the way to things like block dots, which if any of you haven't had a chance to play with electronics but really, really want to for the Coopérathon, it's pretty fun. And then some people might go further on into Arduino or even play with CircuitPython if you want to combine some hardware and software. And CircuitPython is a favorite of mine. It's fun, but I find it hard. It's a new skill to learn. So my best advice for this is that there's a plethora of tools. It's almost overwhelming if you search for prototyping tools. In truth, you're going to find the one that best fits you, that you like to use the most. And so explore them and see what seems to speak out. A lot of these tools have little videos that are like explainer videos on their websites that will show you like, what is it? How does it work? And just go through, see what fits. If you feel overwhelmed by the tool, put it aside, check out another one. And it's okay to feel overwhelmed. A lot of these overwhelm me, and this is my world. But so you're going to find one that you find like, hey, this is amazing. I can use this. And it's also maybe a chance to check in with your team and see what they like to use. I know we're trying to encourage prototyping to be done as much as possible, like with the whole team in mind. But it's very often the case where there's one person that might take the lead on a prototype. And so in that case, you want to make sure that the person's comfortable with the tool they're using. And ultimately, you want to find a way to share it. So some of these softwares and hardwares have a way that you can have collaborators, so multiple people can work on it at the same time. But if not, you can also do these kind of video chats with a screen share so that everyone feels involved with the process and can contribute as the prototype gets built along. So group 2 is just coming in. So Mirada, I'm just wrapping up. And we're going to see if people have some softwares too. I'll just end with this quick start guide. So a lot of people, after going through this much content, are like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, but overwhelmed, and I don't know where to start. So this is something we created for you as a really like hopefully fun way to say, let's get to this. It's not too complicated. You can do it. It's first day of sprint 3. We've got this. So you fill in the blanks. So it's kind of like those old style Mad Libs. You just write down on a piece of paper, take out a piece of paper, take out a pen, and write down for yourself, I am building what are you building? Is it a product, a service, a software? I'm doing this to test if blank, so the target market want blank, want this kind of solution. What are you providing for them? I will use blank and build with blank. So who are my team members that I'm going to be building with to finish the blank prototype for blank? So when is your deadline? And handy guide is to look at the Coopérathon deadlines and just apply that. And finally, I can't wait to start on, well, today. Today's your first day. So that's all for me. We're going to go to questions and answers from everyone. It's really nice to see the other team in there too. Mirela, you're joining the stage. Perfect. Hi. Should I stop screen sharing? Okay, perfect. So Mirela and Cyril, my co-workers, are here. And I'm going to let Mirela take the lead.
Okay. Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everyone. Qu'est-ce qu'on a fait maintenant? C'est on a rejoint les deux groupes, donc la session française avec la session anglaise. On va avoir une session bilingue pour les questions. So what we've done now is simply just to join the two sessions. We had one in French in parallel with you in simultaneous. So now we've joined the two groups, and the question and answer will be bilingual. Just a quick refresh that every time you see a presentation, we have this presentation available for you. So when you go on global, you go on themes, we have a theme that is called question for mentors. When you go within the question for mentors in the documents, you have folders per session, and I will add you here. And I already add the presentation for today. So I remind you that the presentation was created by Foundry with Deborah and Cyril. So you have the presentation that you follow with myself and Deborah. Donc, je vous rappelle, pour le groupe français, la présentation que vous avez suivie aujourd'hui, donc c'était la présentation qui fut préparée par Foundry avec Deborah et Cyril. Vous allez la retrouver dans l'équipe questions pour mentor, dans la partie documents, et le folder, c'est le folder de Sprint 3. Bien sûr, on vous rappelle que vous avez le cours de Sprint 3 qui est dans le centre de formation. So we will remind you that for all the class of Coopérathon, don't forget to go on Learning Center in the Sprint 3. So now we will just take questions for you. I will ask you to have your questions, write your questions on the chat. And Cyril, Deborah, and myself, we will obviously try to answer. Je vais vous demander maintenant de nous écrire vos questions et on va vous répondre. Donc, Cyril, Deborah et moi-même, on va vous répondre.
There was a question from, from Khan, and I just want to highlight it. So in the English session, we were talking about the decision tree as one option if you're trying to show a service. And so Cyril had explored quite a few different tools that are available, and he created a really cool decision tree for Foundry called Connect and Grow, which is available. It will be available on Global soon. And Cyril, I'm just wondering if you could tell them about the software that you use to create that decision tree. There was a couple of people that were interested in it.
Je parle un peu de français pour traduire qu'est-ce que tu as dit. Donc, il y en avait une question qui parlait d'utiliser la technique de arbre de décision si vous avez un service. Donc, pour déjà vous permettre pour un premier prototype. Donc, Cyril travaille actuellement pour faire un exemple justement de l'utilisation de l'arbre de décision pour un service et ça sera disponible bientôt. Et là, je vais laisser Cyril parler plus de qu'est-ce qu'il est en train de préparer.
Oui, alors ce que je vais faire peut-être, Deborah, c'est que je vais l'expliquer en français. Je vais donner une brève explication en anglais, ok. Donc déjà, bonjour à tout le monde. Le système d'arbre de décision, en fait, j'ai utilisé un logiciel qui s'appelle Twine. Je peux vous inviter à le regarder. C'est inspiré en fait des premiers jeux au fond vidéo qui étaient très très simples et qui étaient basés justement sur des questions-réponses. Donc l'idée, c'est que Twine est vraiment très très bien fait, je trouve, parce que ce que ça vous produit, c'est graphique déjà, donc il n'y a pas besoin d'avoir des notions de développement. Vous construisez votre arbre de décision, un peu comme les livres, je ne sais pas si vous vous rappelez ces livres-là, les livres dont vous êtes le héros. Et l'exemple qu'on a pris, nous, c'est un petit peu l'exemple d'une personne qui voudrait commencer sa start-up, au fond. Et on va poser des questions du type, la première question, c'est à quel niveau, à quelle étape en êtes-vous? Est-ce que vous êtes, par exemple, en mode idéation, en mode, justement, plutôt développement? Et partant de là, on parcourt un petit peu, ça vous pose différentes questions, un petit peu en fonction de ce que vous avez besoin pour votre projet. Et ça vous amène à des liens intéressants. Donc, ça peut diriger vers des Fab Labs, vers des comptables, vers etc., etc. Donc, c'est vraiment très versatile comme outil. Je pense que Deborah oui, le lien a été envoyé par Deborah. Donc, c'est ça.
Je vais le traduire en anglais, so I'm just going to translate it into English. So the idea is with the decision tree, I've just shared the link up here, the tool that Cyril was talking about. It's called Twine. The link is twinery.org, and it's a way to code all these decisions. So Cyril will be showing an example. It's going to be available soon on Global, something he's been working on for called the Connect and Grow. And it's a way to, in this case, it's our way to help you discover services. So you just get one question at a time, you choose which answer you want to go for, and then you're taken down that decision road and you have questions as you go. And so when we were talking in our session earlier about this tool, it's something that some people when they're creating a service, ça c'est par contre j'ajoute, donc je peux le traduire après en français. The idea is that for a service, you may want to show people the experience before, during, and after. And using a decision tree is a great way to see where people go. So you plan out all your different scenarios, you imagine all the different routes that people could take, and then you say, where are they going with this? Je peux le traduire juste en français rapidement, mais l'idée que c'est, dans la session en anglais, on a parlé beaucoup du arbre de décision comme un outil qu'on peut utiliser pour faire un prototype sur un service. Et comment on le fait? Mais on considère le avant, pendant et après la service. Et on fait notre arbre décisionnel avec toutes les décisions qu'une personne peut choisir. Exemple concret, c'est si vous êtes en train de créer un restaurant, vous pouvez ajouter toutes les options de comment une personne peut te découvrir, comment il peut se trouver dans ton resto, c'est quoi l'expérience pendant le resto qui est possible et c'est quoi la fin de leur parcours, c'est quoi le après l'événement du restaurant. Et cet outil te permet de le montrer à un testeur et il va choisir son parcours selon ce qu'il ou elle pense faire et ça va te donner une très bonne idée de où les personnes se promènent, en guillemets, dans ton expérience. Is that okay?
Parfait. Il y en a
Okay.
Geneviève Antonios, elle avait un commentaire un peu plus haut qui disait que notre clientèle cible est spécifique à un quartier. Comment puis-je préparer un focus group dans le cadre du Coopérathon? Est-ce que Cyril, Deborah?
Sure. So the question is, how can I create a focus group during the Coopérathon? So usually focus groups, just to put that out there, typically we talk about a focus group and it's a small number of people for a long time. So the best way to do that is to, again, first identify who your users are. And then if you want to find ways to contact them, my recommendation would be either to look in your network, ask your teammates to look in their network to identify those end users, go onto Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, social media platforms where you're going to find your users. Sometimes you're going to be able to identify different traits or different things that your users have in common. And that'll lead you to look for different meetup groups where you can find that target user. And then you can invite them to join a focus group. Online focus groups are typically going to be you sending out a calendar invitation to join you for a video call. And you'd have to prepare yourself to explain what your product or service or application is and get in-depth interviews, in-depth feedback. Je peux le dire en français si tu veux. And it's a lot of details that we wish we could give. I think when you're really doing a real focus group, there's a lot more you want to get into. OK, parfait. Donc, en français, je vais juste dire, pour un focus group, normalement, un focus group, ça comprend un peu de personnes. Donc, c'est un minimum nombre de personnes, mais avec une longue durée. Puis l'objectif, c'est d'aller vraiment creuser en détail toutes les choses que tu peux améliorer avec ton prototype. Puis dans ce cas-là, ce qu'on peut vous suggérer concrètement comme action à prendre pour créer ce focus group, c'est premièrement définir c'est où votre clientèle. Donc, vous avez bien identifié votre target user, vos usagers. Où est-ce qu'ils se promènent en ligne? Est-ce que c'est à travers des médias sociaux? Est-ce que c'est à travers des groupes sur Facebook, sur LinkedIn, sur Instagram? Ça se peut aussi qu'il va t'amener à découvrir que tout le monde dans de tes usagers idéaux sont dans un meetup group. Après ça, tu vas les contacter et inviter les personnes à participer dans ton focus group. Puis concrètement, normalement, avec un focus group en ligne, ces temps-là, ça serait juste une invitation calendrier que tu peux les envoyer. Et après, ce serait peut-être 1 heure ou 2 heures que tu prendrais avec eux autres. Et tu vas commencer à juste introduire ton produit ou ton prototype. Après, tu aurais des questions pour vraiment creuser en détail ce qu'ils en pensent. Et ensuite, recueillir les commentaires. Ce que j'ai ajouté après, c'est juste le focus group, c'est vraiment un processus intense. Puis il y a vraiment beaucoup de consignes pour des meilleures pratiques que tu peux faire. C'est pas quelque chose qu'on a planifié aller en détail en ce moment parce qu'on est vraiment dans la phase de juste de testing de users qui est vraiment des petites hypothèses ici et là, des focus group au complet. Mais c'est sûr qu'avec Foundry, il va y avoir des programmes de beta testing, et ce type de choses, ce type de gabarit, ces ressources qui vont être partagées après le Coopérathon aussi pour cette phase.
Deborah et Cyril, il y a Cindy qui a une question. Elle se demandait justement si le prototyping Canva, donc le Tech for Good prototyping Canva, peut être utilisé et comment dans le cadre d'un service.
Oui, Donc, oui, the short answer is yes. Donc, I'm going to repeat it in English afterwards, but I'll just... Donc, la question, c'est est-ce que le canevas de prototypage peut être utilisé pour un service? Absolument. En fait, on l'utilise de la même façon qu'on utilise pour un produit ou une application. On doit toujours commencer à identifier nos clients et nos usagers qui ne sont pas toujours les mêmes. Après ça, on fait l'analyse de notre service avec tous les critères qu'on a démontrés, comme est-ce que c'est désirable, est-ce que c'est faisable, est-ce que c'est viable. Et même quand on arrive au stade de faire un sketch de c'est quoi comme le prototype look and feel, tu peux simplement dessiner l'expérience. Donc, parfois, ça serait juste dessiner l'endroit, l'environnement, les personnes, comment ils se promènent. Mais c'est important quand même de le mettre sur papier. So in English, yes.
I was thinking, surtout aussi pour un service, peut-être elle peut le mettre sous la forme d'une histoire. Tu sais, donc elle peut faire le dessin, mais peut-être faire aussi tout simplement dans la forme d'une histoire, un peu comment ça marche. Donc, tu prends une personne, Maria, et a fait ceci et cela. Donc, fais-le aussi de la forme d'une histoire, ça marche très bien pour le service. Donc, c'est pour ça qu'on disait que les canevas sont là pour vous supporter, pour vous aider, pour vous poser des questions, mais tout n'est pas dans un canevas. Donc, n'hésitez pas d'utiliser le canevas comme point de départ. Mais pour le service, je dirais que le fait d'utiliser la forme de l'histoire, ça marche très bien. Excuse-moi, Deborah. English version.
Ah.
C'est parfait. Est-ce que tu veux
ajouter quelque chose? Oui, je vais juste rajouter quelque chose avant de passer à l'anglais. C'est qu'on a eu beaucoup de questions autour de ça et tout. C'est revenu aussi les années précédentes. C'est-à-dire, est-ce que quand je fais un service ou une application, j'ai besoin de faire un prototype ou quelle est la forme du prototype? Je dirais que quand on regarde un petit peu, quand on étudie c'est quoi les prototypes, les mock-ups et tout ça, c'est qu'effectivement, c'est peut-être encore, je dirais, plus nécessaire que lorsqu'on fait un objet physique. Parce que bien souvent, on appréhende moins quand c'est dans le monde virtuel et on a vraiment besoin de le schématiser et d'avoir tous les avantages que procure le prototype, de pouvoir le présenter, de pouvoir, ce que tu disais Mirella, de faire du storytelling autour de ça. Donc, il y a une question sur le channel avant, je pensais à Geneviève justement qui posait la question par rapport à ça. Oui, c'est très important pour un service et pour une application quand on est dans le monde virtuel. On se rend compte de façon naturelle que si je désirais refaire une voiture électrique, par exemple, à la Tesla, on se rend compte immédiatement que ça va être compliqué. Par contre, on entend de plus en plus des gens qui se disent capables ou du moins qui ont la prétention de pouvoir refaire, par exemple, des services comme une plateforme Opin ou un Airbnb ou un Kijiji. Parce qu'on appréhende moins facilement peut-être c'est quoi la complexité, c'est quoi le back-end. On voit la partie émergée de l'iceberg. Lorsqu'on met en place le prototype, ça va servir à ça. Puis il n'y a pas que, on parle souvent, on parle de prototype, mais il faut vraiment différencier ce qu'est la maquette, la preuve de concept, le prototype, MVP. Ça, c'est vraiment 3 étapes. Donc, même à l'intérieur de la création d'un prototype, on a différents niveaux. Au sein du Coopérathon, c'est sûr qu'on a des équipes qui ont plus ou moins différentes maturités. Je pense pas qu'on va demander à tout le monde de faire un pilote et un MVP, mais au moins, voilà, mais au moins mettre en place une maquette pour pouvoir, encore une fois, gagner du temps après sur la mise en place du prototype, estimer la complexité et le temps de conception qu'on va avoir. Et je dirais même pouvoir faire parler de son produit, c'est une étape importante, même pour un service, et d'autant plus pour un service, je dirais. Donc voilà, c'était mon petit... Ça va faire beaucoup à traduire ça, Deborah, je suis désolé.
I think before...
Bonjour, Elias.
Elias, do you want me to say it first or you want to add your comment first?
No, you can go ahead. I'll add to what Cyril just said, actually. But,
okay. Go for it.
En particulier pour les gens comme Geneviève, etc., ben, tout d'abord, merci et bravo pour les présentations. Moi, je débarque de Out of Nowhere, je suis comme, je vais rajouter un petit point. Donc, bravo, c'est vraiment, vraiment cool. Puis c'est le défi et l'intérêt, c'est que dans le cadre du Coopérathon, il va y avoir des gens qui vont vouloir développer des idées qui sont vraiment technologiques d'abord, peut-être un produit ou même un objet physique ou des objets connectés, des choses comme ça. Il y a des services, un peu comme ce que Cyril disait, qui sont peut-être comme des hop-in ou des services, on va dire, à utiliser. Mais il y a aussi un autre type de service. Puis je pense que ce que Geneviève, et c'était le point que je voulais rajouter par rapport à ce que Cyril disait, Geneviève qui parlait, je pense tout à l'heure, Mirella, corrige-moi si je me trompe, mais Geneviève, je crois, parlait d'un service communautaire. Donc, ça peut être, Geneviève, corrige-moi aussi là. Allô, Cindy. Si tu veux lancer un service communautaire, donc c'est peut-être un espace communautaire où il y a des gens qui vont se rejoindre et qui vont vivre une expérience. si c'est ça, Geneviève, et que j'ai compris ce que tu voulais dire, ben, moi, je peux te dire, puis Cyril et Deborah, vous êtes les experts, corrigez-moi, mais même ça se prototype. Parce que imaginez, je m'appelle Ilias et je veux lancer un service communautaire. Je peux soit aller acheter mon espace ou le louer, acheter plein de matériel, amener tout ce matériel-là dans l'espace et ensuite attendre que les clients viennent. Ben là, j'aurais peut-être dépensé 50 000 ou 100 000 $, puis peut-être que ça va aboutir à nulle part. Alors que si je suis la logique de Deborah, Mirella, Cyril, etc., et je dis, ben non, comment est-ce que je peux prototyper ça? Comment est-ce que je peux rajouter ou créer cette storytelling-là pour que les gens puissent vivre l'expérience de mon service sans pour autant que j'ai dépensé autant d'argent? En plus d'un casse-croûte. Bon, ben Geneviève, moi j'ai faim en plus. Donc s'il y a le casse-croûte, puis l'espace communautaire, etc., ça coûte de l'argent, surtout le physique. Donc, ce que je t'invite, c'est d'écouter Deborah, Mirella et Cyril et de dire, ben, peut-être que je vais juste raconter une histoire, ensuite appeler 10 personnes dans mon quartier communautaire, leur envoyer un petit formulaire, leur dire, est-ce que cette histoire t'intéresse? Est-ce que ce customer journey correspond à un de tes besoins? Et toi, tu réfléchis en disant, mais comment je vais amener ces gens-là dans mon espace communautaire? Parce que c'est pas juste l'expérience quand les gens sont arrivés, c'est aussi comment tu vas les amener à cette expérience-là. Quand ils vont arriver, qu'est-ce qui va se passer, etc., etc. Bref, je vais m'arrêter là. Like there is a lot to say, mais c'est important parce que même pour vous qui êtes là à l'écran, c'est que les gens qui font partie du Coopérathon, il y a des gens qui veulent lancer un espace ou un service vraiment à la personne, comme on appelle. Donc ça aussi, ça se prototype. Like don't be afraid of that. Bon, je m'arrête là. Voilà, merci Cyril.
C'est parfait. Mais je remercie l'intervention de Ilias. So I'd just like to thank the Ilias's comments as well. I'm going to translate it all. So Ilias, who popped into the scene, he's behind the scenes. He's one of the fantastic people actually writing back answers in live. And I was like, who is that on the team? And of course, it's Ilias. Ilias is everywhere. Thank you, Ilias, for your comments. Donc, c'est Ilias qui est partie de l'équipe et qui répond aux questions live aussi. Puis on apprécie ses interventions. So in English, the question was, can we use this canvas, the prototyping canvas we showed you for services? And the answer is yes. But I want to get into a few of the nuances that they brought about. Mirella pointed out that, so I was showing the canvas and just explaining that even when you're talking about a service, you still have to identify your clients and your users. You still have to do that analysis. Is it desirable? Is it feasible? Is it viable? And it's really helpful to draw it out. Even if you're just drawing out the scene, drawing out the people, how they interact, it helps you to have an image of what it would look like in real life. Mirella brought a really good point out, saying that it doesn't necessarily have to be a drawing of, you know, the people and the scenes. It can also be the story. And we've gotten some comments on the chat since then saying, is it like storytelling? Well, yes, in a way, when you're doing that type of prototype, it is like a story. So Cyril pointed out as well. So there was a lot of solid points that Cyril pointed out, and I want to make sure I capture them all. So the importance of using this as a tool, it is something that's more effective, that will get you to your end result better. It echoed what Ilias was saying too about being a way to test a service without spending all the money, renting out a full space, and getting all your resources only to find out that it doesn't work. There's ways to do it more inexpensively. Cyril, I know I'm missing a key point that you were bringing about. So Cyril was also emphasizing that there's stages when you're prototyping, when you're going from the maquette, so the wireframe to a prototype to an MVP, and then onto your final product. But again, even that phase of prototyping, even when it's for a service, especially when it's for a service, which we know is so costly, it will help you get something to market that is better, it's cheaper, it's actually faster. Again, it just doesn't feel that way.
Deborah et Cyril, on a aussi une question de Séverine qui dit quelle est la différence entre un arbre de décision, de decision tree, et un workflow?
Sure.
Okay,
so, oui. Oh non, tu peux, si tu veux.
Oh, moi, j'ai donné une réponse, en fait, parce que workflow, c'est pas mal, selon moi, le terme générique. Le decision tree est effectivement une version, on va dire, dynamique, puis à l'intérieur duquel il va y avoir plusieurs workflows automatiquement en fonction des décisions qu'on va choisir. Donc, c'est tout. Mais je te laisse compléter, Deborah.
So that's perfect. So the question was, what's the difference between a workflow and a decision tree? And so as Cyril explained, it can be often referring to the same thing, but a workflow is often, when you see everything at once, a decision tree is much more dynamic and interactive. The one thing that they'll add is just that when you're trying to look at how you're testing something for the user, there can be a strong advantage to giving them just a decision tree so they see one thing at a time. Exposing them to the full workflow, well, that can be overwhelming, and you're going to have some kind of bias that's introduced. If a person sees where they want to end up, they're going to choose the path that gets them there the fastest. They may not choose the actual decisions, the concrete decisions that they would make along the way, as they would have if you see a decision tree. Ce parti-là, je vais juste traduire en français. Donc juste pour confirmer que j'ai traduit ce que Cyril avait expliqué en anglais. Et j'ai ajouté le bout que pour un workflow, souvent on voit tout. Et quand vous êtes en train de tester quelque chose avec un usager ou avec un testeur, il y a un grand avantage à ne pas montrer tout. Tu veux que montrer l'histoire où il se promène, vraiment le workflow, le decision tree, le arbre décisionnel interactif. La raison pour ça, c'est que si vous le montrez tout le workflow, il y a des biais qui vont se présenter. C'est typique que quelqu'un comme usager ou un testeur va se dire, OK, je vois tous les places où je peux choisir et je veux aller là. Donc, je vais prendre les décisions qui me rendent à la fin que je veux. Et c'est pas ça que tu veux tester. Vraiment, tu veux tester avec l'arbre décisionnel qu'à chaque phase de l'expérience, qu'est-ce qu'ils choisisseraient? C'est quoi leur choix? Et après, ils vont t'amener à une certaine place.
Merci beaucoup, Deborah. Il nous reste quelques minutes. Il nous reste 2 minutes pour être très précis. J'aimerais juste rappeler à toutes les personnes, peut-être, et je vous laisse aussi en attendant Deborah et Cyril, si jamais vous avez une autre question à répondre. Mais qu'est-ce que j'aimerais beaucoup rappeler à tous nos participants? Sur Global, j'aimerais partager l'écran et je vais vous montrer. Donc, c'est important de regarder en début de chaque sprint pour voir quelles sont les activités qui s'offrent à vous. Donc, je vais juste highlighter finalement, je vais partager mon écran, comme ça je pourrais le faire avec vous. Pour rappeler justement où vous trouvez l'information. Donc, quand vous allez sur Global, on va y aller ensemble. Donc, là, j'étais dans une séance pour présenter, bien sûr, donnez-moi juste 2 secondes. Je vais vous rappeler que tout le parcours du compétiteur, donc the competitor journey, you have it here. So, on the top of the page, en haut de la page, vous avez, en début de chaque sprint, vous avez la vue générale des activités qui s'offrent à vous. Donc, qu'est-ce que j'aimerais highlighter? What I would like to highlight is that for the sprint 3, you have 2 webinars on Tuesday. Vous avez 2 webinars mardi. Vous avez un premier qui parle du marketing digital. So you have a first webinar on digital marketing and growth hacking. And the second one that it's no-code tool. It will be a session that it's in English only, but it's absolutely to not miss. Please do not miss. You'll have lots of tools for everybody that likes to prototype. This is an amazing session. On Thursday, you have another one. It's here is the Python data analysis. It's another webinar that it's in English. So it's for people that they need to analyze data so they can understand more. The customer needs more, you know, if it's a business specifically. So this is a workshop for people. They don't need to be developer. This is a workshop that it gives you notions how to be able to analyze data by using Python. Donc, je vais le faire en français. Vous avez la semaine prochaine, donc on commence le sprint aujourd'hui, le sprint 3, des ateliers à ne pas manquer mardi au niveau du digital, le marketing digital, le marketing numérique. Le deuxième atelier à ne pas manquer, c'est en anglais, mais c'est de découvrir des ateliers qui vous permettent de prototyper, développer sans savoir à coder. Donc, c'est vraiment à ne pas manquer. C'est éblouissant, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire de nos jours. Et un autre atelier jeudi, donc c'est juste avant les sessions de mentorat de groupe, c'est vous permettre de faire l'analyse des données en utilisant un software qui s'appelle Python. Donc, ce n'est pas pour des développeurs, c'est pour tout le monde. Donc, ça vous donne quelques notions pour vous permettre justement de savoir comment faire de l'analyse des données. Bien sûr, on vous rappelle, c'est chaque jeudi de 6 à 8. C'est le mentorat de groupe. C'est une occasion incroyable. Donc, chacun de vos équipes, vous avez 1, 2, 3 mentors qui vous suivent chaque semaine. Ça, c'est les mentors, qu'est-ce qu'on appelle les mentors en profondeur, de deep mentors. Et chaque semaine, vous avez le mentorat de groupe. C'est l'occasion pour rencontrer des spécialistes, des experts de différents domaines qui vous donnent du feedback. Donc, c'est une session vraiment à ne pas manquer. Donc, encore une fois, donc c'est les 3 sessions vraiment à ne pas manquer. Le mercredi, on Wednesday, it's the peer-to-peer session, and the first part you'll meet an entrepreneur. So this the next Wednesday, you'll meet Sarah Wells. She's an Olympian and she became an entrepreneur. So she will share with you her journey to become an entrepreneur. She's extremely inspiring. Her business, it's amazing. She's working with kids. So they are, I think, from 12 and more. So please come to really talk with an entrepreneur and understand also what is the life of an entrepreneur, how you become an entrepreneur, what it's more to be an entrepreneur. And the second part, it's you with other teams sharing of your Coopérathon experience. If you have questions, how others can answer them, what is difficult for you, how we can help. So it's really a session to answer all your questions and really help each other. Donc, voilà, merci beaucoup. Je vais laisser peut-être le temps à Deborah de clôturer l'atelier et à Cyril.
Parfait. Donc, on voulait vraiment remercier tout le monde. Oh, I'm speaking in French. So we really want to thank everyone for being here this morning. On behalf of the whole Coopérathon team, the whole Desjardins Open Innovation team, it's been a huge pleasure to be with you and to be part of this journey. We know that you guys are building incredible products and services and solutions. And personally, I'm ecstatic to be here, and I really can't wait to see what comes out of this. One last mention as JF, so Les Coopérathon is mentioning, come join us at 1:30 today. This is going to be the session where I believe we're revealing quite a few important things for the Coopérathon. So it's going to include everything that you need to know about what you need to submit for the final Coopérathon. So what's the evaluation grid? What are those final tools that you will be asked to submit for your final product? So today, 1:30, be there.
Using exactly this link. So go forward, Deborah, and I will say a bit more about that.
Yes, perfect. So je voulais dire merci beaucoup pour vous tous d'être ici ce matin. C'était absolument un plaisir d'être avec vous puis de voir vos projets qui sont déjà super fantastiques et on a hâte de voir la suite. Cyril, do you want to say the last remarks?
Déjà, un grand merci aux participants qui se sont connectés. Merci à toutes les deux aussi pour votre présentation. C'était vraiment très clair. Je vois en ce moment, je suis en train de lire ce qui était posté par les personnes. Il y a des questions qui continuent à arriver sur les decision trees, sur où trouver les événements, etc. Il y a pas mal d'informations qui sont sur Global, mais vous savez qu'on reste disponible, donc vous pouvez nous écrire là-dessus et on vous répondra. Merci à tout le monde. Puis effectivement, moi je suis très content de voir l'avancée des projets, puis de voir l'évolution en cours de présentation des gens qui commencent pendant les présentations. Donc on voit que c'est fortement utile à comprendre un peu mieux ce qui est demandé et qu'est-ce que c'est que, par exemple, un prototype. Donc, merci à tout le monde. Je vous dis au revoir.
Merci beaucoup, Foundry. Maintenant, j'aimerais aussi vous rappeler à tous les participants qu'il faut absolument venir au café de Coopérathon cet après-midi. Donc, le café Coopérathon est là pour répondre à toutes vos questions. On va commencer à parler vraiment de la partie compétition. On va commencer à parler de la grille d'évaluation. On va commencer à parler de qu'est-ce qu'il faut soumettre pour justement la compétition. Donc, on vous invite à 1h30 sur ce même lien pour avoir ces détails-là et bien sûr poser les questions et les recevoir. So, thank you so much, everybody. We are strongly invite you today on this meme link to come at 1:30. We will start discussion about the competition. We will have information about the matrix that we use and judges that we use to mark your project. You'll have information about what it will be to be submitted for the competition and more information about the competition in itself. So please come. It's between 1:30 to 2:30. You can ask all your questions. So it will be bilingual. See you there. same link, 1:30 here. It's a pleasure to see you. Bye.